My name is William. Only a week after my divorce papers were signed, my ex-wife rushed headfirst into another marriage. Yes, you heard that correctly. Within days of our official split, she was already walking down the aisle again. She couldn't stop gushing about how she had finally found her perfect husband. Listening to her, you'd think she'd won the lottery with how much she bragged. But when I eventually saw the man she had left me for, I couldn't hold back my laughter. And before you start thinking I'm just being bitter or petty, let's rewind a little, because to truly understand why I find it hilarious now, you need the full backstory. It all began during a weekend trip to my aunt's house. My aunt loved having me over whenever I had free time, so visiting her had become a regular thing. Coincidentally, Evelyn was there that day too. She knew my aunt through their church group. They weren't best friends exactly, but they were friendly enough that Evelyn would occasionally stop by to help out or simply catch up. To be honest, the first time I met Evelyn, she didn't leave much of an impression on me. Not because she wasn't attractive, she definitely was, but because sometimes you meet someone who just doesn't stick in your mind. That was Evelyn. We exchanged a few polite words, and that was about it. If you had asked me to describe her a week later, I probably wouldn't have been able to recall a single detail. Fast forward a few months, I was visiting my aunt again. And there she was, Evelyn, once more. Only this time, the atmosphere felt different. She was moving around the house, helping my aunt tidy up and cooking little dishes here and there. We ended up talking more that day. To my surprise, the conversation was natural and easy, flowing effortlessly. Time slipped by without me even noticing. Eventually, Evelyn said she had to get going. While she gathered her things, my aunt, being her usual nosy but good-hearted self, leaned over and whispered, "Don't let that one get away." I just laughed, assuming she was teasing. But as Evelyn reached the door, she turned, pulled out her phone, and said with a smile, "Hey, let's stay in touch." We exchanged numbers. Simple as that. After she left, my aunt couldn't resist poking fun, tossing little jokes about how I was already smitten. I laughed along, not giving it much thought at the time. But now, looking back, I realized that was the real starting point, even if I didn't recognize it then. From there, Evelyn and I started communicating more often. We texted throughout the day and spent long hours chatting on the phone late into the night. She always seemed genuinely interested in whatever random nonsense I rambled about. One thing I made sure of early on was that she was genuinely single. Luckily, my aunt had already confirmed that detail through her network at church, saving me from even needing to ask. With that assurance, I allowed myself to see where things might lead. After several weeks of texting and late-night calls, I finally gathered the nerve to ask her out on a proper date. Without hesitation, she smiled and agreed. We set plans for the upcoming weekend. Honestly, everything just clicked after that. Our relationship felt easy, almost effortless. We spent a few years dating before even thinking about marriage. I always believed that rushing into marriage was a recipe for disaster, the kind of mistake people made when they didn't take time to truly understand one another. So we were cautious, deliberate, taking it slow. Eventually, after years of building a solid foundation, we agreed it was time to take the next step. We got married, convinced that by doing everything the right way, we'd set ourselves up for a lasting future. But life has a funny way of throwing you curveballs. And looking back now, it's clear. Taking it slow doesn't always mean you'll end up with forever. Our wedding was only the beginning. I had just started a new job, the highest-paying position I'd ever landed. At the time, it felt like the smartest decision I could make to secure our future. The only downside? It demanded a lot of travel. I was often flying out of state for days, sometimes even weeks at a stretch. I despised being away from home, but I convinced myself it was a temporary sacrifice. Put in the work now, stack up the savings, and eventually transition into something closer to home. It seemed like a sound plan, at least, in my mind. I thought Evelyn would see it the same way. Initially, she appeared to be on board. But as my trips became more frequent, the strain between us became harder to ignore. Where there used to be a warm goodbye kiss, there was now a cold, detached nod. Instead of asking when I'd be back, she'd mutter things like, "Of course, another trip." I tried countless times to explain that these trips weren't about wanting distance from her, they were about building something better for both of us. The extra income was crucial. Still, no matter how many different angles I tried to present it, she just couldn't, or wouldn't, understand. To her, it seemed like every plane ticket was another choice I made against her. Whenever I returned home, dragging my suitcase behind me and barely able to keep my eyes open after catching a red-eye flight, I was met not with kindness, but with arguments over things so trivial they should have been laughed off. Then came the accusations. Wild, baseless accusations that blindsided me. Dead serious, she'd ask if I was cheating during my trips. She told me it made perfect sense to her, that my exhaustion wasn't from working too hard, but from spending time with another woman. At first, I thought if I kept my cool, refused to get defensive, and calmly reassured her, she'd realize how wrong she was and let it go. I told her over and over, she had nothing to worry about. I loved her, and I was faithful. But the suspicions only grew louder. Coming home began to feel like stepping into a courtroom, me on the witness stand, and Evelyn playing the relentless prosecutor, convinced of my guilt before I'd even opened my mouth. I found myself dragging my feet whenever I came back into town, inventing reasons to stay out longer, delaying the moment I'd have to walk through that front door into another fight. Yet, despite the emotional distance, despite all the tiptoeing, nothing seemed to change. The warmth between us kept fading until it was almost completely gone. The saddest part? I wasn't happier on the road either. I missed the home we were supposed to be building together. I even started combing through job listings, searching desperately for anything that would let me stay local. But every offer I found came with a massive pay cut, one that would leave us struggling to pay the bills. It felt like an impossible choice, either be broke or be alone. Neither option felt like a win. There's one trip back home that's burned into my memory. I walked through the door and, for the first time in what felt like forever, Evelyn greeted me with a gentle smile. For a fleeting moment, I let myself believe things were turning around, that maybe she was tired of the endless fights too. Maybe we were finally finding our way back to each other. For a little while, it even seemed like we had. But soon, I noticed something else. Evelyn wasn't around much anymore. She'd tell me she had errands to run or was visiting friends. I tried not to let my mind spiral. I didn't want to be the paranoid husband who suspects the worst just because his wife has her own life outside of him. So, I kept quiet. Still, that uneasy feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. One afternoon, just like so many others, she mentioned she was heading to a friend's house. I gave a nod, watched her leave, and settled onto the couch, mindlessly flipping through TV channels. When I opened the door, I was stunned to see the very same friend Evelyn had claimed to be visiting, standing there asking if Evelyn was home. For a second, I just stood there, unsure how to process it. Trying to stay composed, I invited her inside, my mind racing. After a few minutes of painfully awkward small talk, I casually pulled out my phone and called Evelyn. She picked up right away, sounding completely at ease. When I asked where she was, she responded without hesitation. "I'm at my friend's house." I glanced across the room at her friend, the same one now sitting awkwardly in my living room, and felt my stomach drop. The hurt and betrayal hit me all at once. Still keeping my voice steady, I asked Evelyn, "Is your friend with you right now?" Without missing a beat, she answered, "Yeah, she's right here next to me." In that moment, something inside me shifted. She had lied, effortlessly, without even flinching. I didn't argue. I didn't accuse. I simply said, "All right, talk later," and hung up. Staring across at her oblivious friend, I made up my mind. I wasn't going to blow up over the phone. I would wait until she came home, and confront her face to face, where there would be no way for her to spin it. Later that evening, Evelyn finally walked through the door. I was ready. In a calm, almost detached voice, I asked, "So, where were you today?" She immediately repeated the same story, claiming she'd spent the afternoon with her friend. I didn't get angry. I didn't even raise my voice. I simply looked her dead in the eyes and said, "That's strange, because she spent the afternoon here with me, wondering where you were." I watched the color drain from Evelyn's face. At first, she clung stubbornly to her lie, insisting I must have been mistaken. Still calm, I suggested she call her friend, right then, to clear up any confusion. That's when the cracks really started to show. Suddenly she had a dozen excuses. She didn't want to put her friend in an awkward position, didn't want to drag anyone else into our problems. But the truth was out, and she knew it. When she realized she couldn't talk her way out of it, she switched tactics altogether. Instead of owning up to her lies, Evelyn turned the tables. Suddenly, I was the villain. She accused me of emotionally neglecting her long before she ever found comfort elsewhere. She said I had prioritized my career over our relationship for years, and if I had been a better husband, she wouldn't have needed anyone else. She even dared to suggest that I must have been unfaithful, simply because I traveled for work. It was a desperate attempt to rewrite the story, paint herself as the victim and me as the heartless one. Eventually, the real truth slipped out. She admitted she had been seeing another man. Someone who, according to her, made her feel cherished, seen, and loved, everything she claimed I had failed to provide. She didn't sugarcoat it either. She went on and on about how incredible he was, how attentive, how supportive, comparing him to everything I supposedly wasn't. When she finally laid it all bare, I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I didn't try to argue my worth. I just listened, and then I let go. The very next morning, I contacted a lawyer and set the wheels in motion for divorce. It was easily one of the most painful decisions I've ever made, but, strangely, also one of the clearest. When someone shows you you're no longer important to them, you don't cling harder. You walk away with whatever dignity you have left. I knew I couldn't spend another day pretending there was anything left to salvage. And for anyone who's never lived it, divorce isn't some clean, dramatic explosion like in the movies. It's slow. It's agonizing. It drags out every raw nerve you have and lays it bare for the world to see. Court hearings, endless stacks of paperwork, constant meetings with lawyers, they became my daily reality. Emotionally, it drained me in ways I didn't even know were possible. Every tiny disagreement turned into another drawn-out fight. And the system didn't care who had been betrayed, only what looked fair on paper. While I was wading through that legal nightmare, Evelyn didn't seem burdened at all. She packed her things, moved straight in with her so-called perfect new man, and acted like she hadn't just torched the life we built together. The few times we did have to speak, mainly to divide assets or finalize agreements, she couldn't help but throw in her little jabs. Smirking, she'd say things like, "You were never really enough for me. Thank God I found someone who knows how to treat a woman." A few hours later, the doorbell rang. I finally found a real man who knows how to treat a woman. At first, hearing those words cut deep, I won't pretend they didn't. But over time, I realized I couldn't keep giving her voice space in my mind. I couldn't control what she chose to say, only how I decided to react. Nearly a year later, after what felt like an endless blur of court dates, paperwork, and negotiations, the divorce was finalized. Evelyn walked away with a few possessions from the settlement, but I kept what really mattered. More importantly, I kept my self-respect, and no amount of material loss could outweigh that. Exactly a week after the ink dried on the divorce papers, I heard through the grapevine that Evelyn had already remarried. Someone mentioned it in passing, and for a moment, I just blinked in disbelief. No pause, no time to breathe, she had jumped straight into another marriage. But to my own surprise, I didn't feel any anger. I simply wished her well in my mind and kept moving forward. I had no plans to ever see her again, but life doesn't always go according to plan. About a month later, while running errands one afternoon, fate decided to cross our paths. There she was, Evelyn, standing with her new husband. She spotted me first, and instantly, her smile faded. When I glanced at the man beside her, I almost laughed. Throughout the divorce, Evelyn had spent so much energy telling anyone who would listen how her new man was worlds ahead of me. More successful, stronger, better. And yet, standing in front of me was a frail, unkempt guy who looked like he still lived with his parents. I couldn't help but think, this is who she gave everything up for? It was almost too ridiculous to be angry about. She clutched his arm tightly and hurried him away like a child trying to hide a broken toy from sight. I simply smiled, wished them a good day, and kept walking. My laughter wasn't bitter. It was the kind that bubbles up when you realize just how close you came to disaster. In that moment, I felt lighter than I had in years. Like a massive weight had finally been lifted off my chest. There was a peace inside me that I hadn't known in a long time. The peace that comes when you finally close a door that should have been shut a long time ago. Evelyn had made her choice, and I had made mine. And looking back, it's clear, I ended up with a better deal. Freedom. Clarity. A future wide open with possibilities. After the divorce, I made a vow to myself. I wouldn't jump into another relationship just to fill an empty space. I needed time to heal, time to rediscover who I was without the chaos and heartbreak. Funny enough, not long after, one of Evelyn's old friends started reaching out more often. Sending casual messages, striking up conversations whenever we crossed paths. But I stayed cautious. After surviving what I had, the last thing I needed was more drama. I wasn't searching for another heartbreak. I was searching for peace. Looking back now, I realized there were some tough truths I had to learn the hard way, lessons you only really understand once you live them. First, you can't fix someone determined to misunderstand you. I spent years trying to explain, trying to be patient, trying to be the steady one. But when someone has already decided you're the villain, it doesn't matter how gentle your words are or how hard you work. They'll twist your actions, your intentions, even your kindness, into something ugly. And that's on them, not you. Second, you can't lose someone who was never truly committed to you in the first place. For a long time, I thought losing Evelyn meant I had failed, that I had let something precious slip through my hands. But the truth was, she had emotionally checked out long before we ever signed anything. Her body was still there, but her heart had been gone for a long time. I'm sharing all of this not to fish for sympathy, but because maybe someone out there needs to hear it. Maybe you're trying to fix something that's already broken beyond repair. Maybe you're blaming yourself for someone else's choice to leave. If that's you, hear me. Peace is better than pretending. Freedom is better than forcing yourself to hold on to something that only causes you pain. That's my story. Now I want to hear yours. Have you ever gone through something similar? What did it teach you? Let's talk about it in the comments.